In 1347, 12 ships arrived at the port of Sicily. Most of the crew was already dead. The few who were still alive carried something far worse than any weapon, a disease that would go on to kill half of Europe. No one knew the catastrophe it would bring. The Black Death didn't begin in Europe. It began thousands of miles away, in the grasslands of Central Asia. For centuries, the plague lived quietly inside fleas that fed on wild rodents, marmots, rats, and other small animals that roamed the steppe. The disease was always there, but it rarely reached humans. That changed in the 14th century. The Mongol Empire had connected east and west, like never before. Trade routes stretched from China to the Mediterranean, and merchants traveled farther and faster than at any point in history. Along with silk, spices, and silver, they carried something they couldn't see. The plague moved along trade routes, reaching the Black Sea by the 1340s. There, Mongol armies were laying siege to the city of Kaffa, a trading post controlled by Italian merchants. According to chroniclers, the Mongols did something terrifying. They catapulted their dead over the city walls, hoping the disease would spread inside. Whether or not that story is fully accurate, the plague reached the Italian merchants who were trapped inside the city. When the survivors fled Kaffa by ship, they carried the plague with them. The disease traveled in the rats that lived in the cargo holds, in the fleas on those rats, and in the bodies of the sailors themselves. The ships sailed toward Sicily, toward Genoa, toward a continent that had no idea what was coming. When those ships arrived in Sicily in October 1347, the authorities tried to turn them away. But it was already too late. The plague had arrived. From Sicily, the disease spread north through Italy, then into France, Spain, and across the Alps. Within 2 years, it had reached England, Scandinavia, and the edges of the known world. Nothing could stop it. The speed was terrifying. A person could go to bed healthy and be dead by morning. The symptoms came in stages: fever, chills, then the swollen lymph nodes called buboes, dark patches on the skin, and finally, in most cases, death. Doctors had no cure. Priests had no answers. Some communities lost half their population in a matter of weeks. Streets emptied, businesses closed. Entire communities fell silent as the plague swept relentlessly across the land. In Florence, the writer Boccaccio described people dining, drinking, and enjoying life while their neighbors died, because no one expected to survive long enough to face consequences. In Paris, the cemeteries overflowed. In London, mass graves were dug at East Smithfield, where archaeologists would later uncover the remains of thousands. The scale of what happened is hard to comprehend. But the Black Death didn't just take lives. It reshaped the entire world. If you're finding this story gripping, subscribe to follow more history that changed the course of civilization. By 1351, the worst of the pandemic had passed. But Europe was unrecognizable. An estimated 25 to 50 million people were dead, roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of the continent's population. In some regions, the toll was even higher. The world that emerged from the Black Death was fundamentally different from the one that entered it. With so many dead, labor became scarce. Workers who survived could demand higher wages, and for the first time, peasants had real power. Feudalism, the social system that had governed Europe for centuries, began to crack. The church lost its unquestioned authority, as people questioned how a loving God could allow such suffering. Medicine began to shift from superstition toward observation and study. Some historians argue that the Black Death accelerated the end of the Middle Ages and set the stage for the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the modern world. The disaster transformed Europe's economy, society, and history, leaving a lasting impact that would shape future generations. More than 6 centuries later, the Black Death remains one of the deadliest pandemics ever recorded. The bacterium that caused it, Yersinia pestis, still exists today, though modern antibiotics can now treat it. Archaeologists continue to study the mass graves of plague victims, searching for clues about how the disease evolved and spread. But the Black Death is more than a historical event. It's a reminder of how quickly the world can change, how fragile civilization really is, and how one event, arriving quietly on a handful of ships, can reshape the course of human history forever. The Black Death wiped out half of Europe, but it also birthed the modern world. If you want to understand how civilizations rise and fall, from ancient empires to world-changing pandemics, subscribe to Empire Down. New stories from history every week.